Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In this opportunity, we would like to present our materials in vocabulary class of Mr. Najib about overview of the field of interpreting and main theoretical concepts. And let us introduce ourselves. My name is azza.
My name is Muhammad Adam.
And my name is Muhammad Haikal.
So let's start it.
The first about this chapter, I'm going to give you some points. The first is explores the definition and aims of the act of translation. Introduce the controversy over the concepts of faithfulness, accuracy, and equivalence. Describes the differences between translation that is writtenly and interpreting orally. Compares and contrasts the different translation activities from the written to the hybridity between written and oral to the wholly oral. Analyzes the difference between orientation of analyzes the different orientation of different translation tasks, from the more target audience oriented to the more source text oriented. Describes the different steps to the interpreting process, defines community interpreting, and outlines the differences between community interpreting and conference interpreting.
What is interpreting? Interpreting as process interpreting has traditionally been regarded as a branch of translation, even rather instant translation, as a conversion process from a language to another, in either the write or the spoke mode. More especially, interpreting refers to the translation of the spoken word and translation to the translation of the right word. Interpreting is complex, challenging, and rewarding. It is very demanding, confusing, but it can also fun and exciting. It can be a way to help people who otherwise could not communicate.
Introduces the controversy over the concepts of faithfulness, accuracy, and equivalence. What is a good mastery if not an accurate, equivalence, and faithful interpretations? It must say the same thing, fulfill the same purpose, and create the same impressions in the target language as did the essential did in both. Perhaps the interpretations should recreate not the same impression but an equivalent one another.
The differences between translation and interpreting. Translation is done writtenly, does not need public speaking ability, doesn't need good reaction time, doesn't need to see the situation. The performance of the translator is important. Interpreting is done orally, needs public speaking ability, needs good reaction time, needs to see the situation. The performance of the interpreter depends on the situation.
Compares and contrasts the different translations activities from the written to the hybridity between written and oral to the wholly oral. The first, translators versus interpreters. While both translator and interpreters transfer meaning between languages, there's a big difference between what they do and the skill they possess. This simple infographic will help you determine which type you need. The first about write and speak. Write for translator and speak for interpreter. And then the time. Translator will delight will if your final translation product will take days or longer, and about interpreters, real time. The real time is must be on interpreter. The final product is delivered instantly. And then about the language. Translator must have target language. Translations don't have to be conversationally fluent in their source language but must be in the target language. And about the interpreters are both languages. It's essential that interpreters are native or near native in both languages. And then about the source. Translators need dictionaries. Translators rely on numerous industry-specific resources, and interpreters does not don't need the dictionaries. It must on the spot. When on the job, interpreters do not have consult dictionaries, glossaries, and etc. And about the job, and translator will be in legal contract. A contract is a common example of a translation product, and about the interpreters is business meeting. Conducting a meeting, you will need an interpreter.
To analyze the different orientation of different translation tasks, from the more target audience oriented to the more source text oriented. This target audience should not be aware of the fact that they are reading a translation. The text should read as smoothly as possible and be completely adapted to their culture. And if this requires altering the original structure, merging two sentences into a single one, or even changing the style of the text, the only thing that cannot and must not be changed is the message. It might be that translating in these circumstances is very easy. On the contrary, having so many options entails a high degree of responsibility. Clearly, the translator is responsible for every choice he makes. The audience of the translation should be taken into account and based on it, should measure the success or failure of the translation. Therefore, it is guessed that another condition can be added to the profile of a successful translator: to be familiar with the range of potential audience of his own culture.
Describe the different steps to the interpreting process. The process skills needed for interpreting into analysis and conversion. In analysis, the interpreter must derive meaning from the source message by attending and blocking distracting such conversation in conversational noise heavy action, storing information in short term memory, names of people, dates, lists of things, accessing long term memory for things already known by the interpreter to understand what was said conceptually. After the message has been broken down by analysis, the interpreter must use composition to restart the message in the target language, using linguistic and cultural knowledge to state
Knowledge.
knowledge to state this message in a may in a way those items starts the th- store the during analysis recharge reaccess long-term memory to help plan the production of the target message and then actually product the interpretation. It should be obvious that one must have a deep knowledge as possible of both language and culture.
Content knowledge about the world, science, history, math, religions, and so on helps the interpreter gain meaning from a speaker instead of having to both learning the material and teach the material simultaneously in the case of educational interpreting. There is also an internal environment inside the interpreter that can lead to the noise, that is, thought or feelings that nag at the interpreter while she or he is trying to work. Hunger, fatigue, illness, repulsions at the topic, lack of confidence. Working on minimizing this will lead to a better interpretation. During concentrating, the interpreter seeks to understand the source message, While the interpreter listens, she or he must attend and analyze how what is being said relates to the main goal. In representing, the interpreter must analyze the representations of the source message until it is stripped of language and remains as an idea or series of ideas beyond language. In planning, this representation is now composed into the other language by assigning it words or signs. The interpreter must decide how to open and close sections of the communication, make transitions from one idea to the next, watch for red flags that might require more to and request for clarifications, and finally deliver the target message.
Defines community interpreting. A community interpreting is a specific type of interpreting service which is found more in community-based than organizational situations. It is particularly vital service in communities with large number of ethnic minorities, enabling those minorities to access services where, due to the language barrier, they would otherwise find it difficult. Situations where such interpreters are necessary are typical include medical, educational, housing, social security, and legal areas. Community interpreters need not only to be fluent in the language that they are interpreting, but also with the public services involved, to be aware of the cultural and racial implications of the interpreting work. Interpreters are also expected to follow the interpreter's code of ethics.
Outline the difference between community interpreting and converse interpreting. Community interpreting takes place in a variety of settings in and around the public space. Therefore, under the umbrella of community interpreting, there are court interpreters, medical interpreters, social work interpreter, education interpreter for the deaf and others. While conversation interpreter often use constructive interpretation for smaller and more intimate affairs as well as for curtain teleconversion. They are predominantly known for providing simultaneous interpreting service at conferences, summit, and corporate level meetings.
Okay, that's all of me. Thank you very much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much.